Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Hogging the Mic, the Boar's official podcast bringing you student journalism like you've never heard it before.
This week, we're bringing you an interview that will take you behind the scenes on some of the biggest TV documentaries and interviews of recent years, as we chat to a former Boar editor who now works as a producer and director at ITN.
To hear how the team behind Channel 4's award-winning general election coverage prepared for the night in just 6 weeks, and to find out the peculiar location that Prince Harry's team offered up to ITV to record the bombshell interview with Tom Bradby, make sure you stick around for the interview later in the podcast.
But first, let's dive into what's been happening in the Boar this week as we spotlight some of the articles that have stood out to us since the last episode. Firstly, though, as the resident on-campus host of Hogging the Mic, I just wanted to start by saying that it was great to meet so many of you at Freshers events in Welcome Week, and we hope that you have settled in well and are enjoying the start of term. While Welcome Week might be over, the Boar has got lots more events coming your way over the next few weeks, including a coffee morning, film screening, and our first circle of the year, so check out the Boar's Instagram for all the details.
Now, let's move on to spotlighting some articles. Shall we start with news?
Yeah, so in news, we've spoken a lot about funding cuts in the section over the past few months, but we have an article this week that takes that idea and starts to think about how it is impacted on degree programs with so many cuts to degree programs at universities across the country. So Nadanya Thangabal has written an article, Almost 4,000 Courses Fall Prey to University Funding Crisis, with humanities degrees hardest hit. And it looks at how universities across the UK are facing cuts to degrees, as 4 of the Sunday Times top 10 unis have also had to close their courses over the past year, including at Warwick, where courses in electronic engineering and economics and industrial organisation have been cut. Articles like this are so important to the news section. We have so many articles about higher education, about universities, but when we start looking at news that affects Warwick and other universities directly, it really impacts on our reader base. Our readers or university students, they want to hear about university news. So any writers, any new writers who want to write about news, have a think about how you can put a Warwick spin on any article. And that's exactly what Nadanya's done in her article. So it's a great article to check out. So go and have a read of that one.
Definitely very good advice for our new writers as well. So this week I am spotlighting an article which actually falls into 2 different culture sections. There are film and TV. So Mason Stannard-Parage's The Perfect Television and Film Guide to Autumn takes us through different films and TV shows which will help us to get into the autumnal spirit. From The X-Files to Over the Garden Wall, Dead Poet Society, and my personal favourite Gilmore Girls, Mason describes why each of his picks perfectly encapsulates the cozy season, so we highly recommend giving one of Mason's top picks a try. Across the culture sections, we have had new reviews published in the music and games section, so definitely go and check those out. And also the articles from the Freshers print have gone live on our website, so make sure to check them out as well if you haven't already.
This week, I'm actually spotlighting an article which isn't in the sports section. It is still sport themed though. It's an article from the lifestyle section by Abby Pearce, and it's headlined From Pitch to Mat, Why Athletes Are Turning to Yoga. I thought this piece was really interesting. It looks at how Ryan Giggs and Serena Williams have cited yoga as keeping them sharp and prolonging their career, and also features a quote from Warwick sports scholar, who has found yoga helpful in supporting her performance in university sport. She plays Bucks netball. Abby also offers advice on how to start yoga. I think this piece is really insightful because it's kind of talks about how you can bring something into your own lifestyle that professional athletes are using, that work athletes are using. It touches on campus life, it touches on professional sport, a bit of everything really. In the sports section, there's also been a really good selection of articles, particularly more local stories now that uni has commenced again. So there's been some match reviews of local football and ice hockey, so Coventry Blaze and Leamington FC matches. So make sure you give them a read and go and watch some local sport as well.
And if you would like to be featured in our next article spotlight, then don't forget to join our WhatsApp chats. It's the best way to get involved with the Boar, and you can find the links for each section's WhatsApp chats in the main WhatsApp community or on the individual Instagram accounts. So join the chats and start writing.
And also, for those of you who want to join the team and are interested in the editing side of the Boar, then don't forget that deputy editor applications for all 16 sections close on the 10th of October, which, if you're listening to this on the day of the release, is tomorrow. So you don't have long to get your applications in. Now, though, let's get into our interview with the next Boar alum on the podcast.
Our guest today is a former Boar editor who has gone on to be a producer and director at ITN. He shared behind-the-scenes information all about some of the biggest documentaries published over the last few years. So get yourself comfortable and enjoy our interview with Chris Hackett.
Our guest today is someone who has worked behind the scenes on some of the biggest documentaries and news programmes in recent years. He was producer-director for Prince Harry's first solo in-depth interview with ITV. He worked on Channel 4's election night coverage for both the UK and US elections in 2024, and he's produced countless other documentaries for ITN. At the Boar, he held the positions of both news editor and then editor-in-chief, or editor as it was then known, and he's now returning to speak to us on Hogging the Mic. Chris Hackett, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
So we're going to start the podcast with the question that we start every podcast with, and that is, what drew you to the Boar when you joined Warwick?
I think I was always interested in journalism when I was at school. So I think I went to one of the very first Boar meetings that they had when I was in first year, feeling quite intimidated by the number of people that were there, and it just felt like this big thing at the time, this big student newspaper that was really successful and doing really interesting stuff. And I just wanted to get involved, really. I think I just kind of knew that if I wanted to get into journalism and wanted to get into that kind of industry, you had to have good work experience. And that was often as much about doing student journalism as it was kind of doing work experience at national papers or local radio stations. So I was keen to get involved as soon as I got there, really.
And you spoke there a bit about what drew you to the Boar and the experience that you thought you could gain, and you definitely did gain a lot of experience. You started as a writer and then went on to be news editor and then editor, which is now known as editor-in-chief. What are your overriding memories of your time at the Boar?
I was thinking about this because I was thinking before doing this, I was just like, it was just so much fun. Like, it was just the Saturdays that we'd sit in the Boar office and just be like putting the paper together and just be really having a laugh, and socials and meeting some really good friends who I'm still friends with now. It was just, and also just seeing your name on a kind of like a physical paper that is being distributed around campus, and getting the mick taken out of me by my flatmates oh yeah, that was such a brilliant article. And I remember it was so much fun. I've got such great memories of working at the Boar, like much more than my degree. I think, it was definitely where I really enjoyed university and where I really got to have really good fun.
I think a lot of us at the Boar would agree now that it still brings us a lot of fun, lots of good memories. So as we've mentioned a couple of times, you were editor at the Boar in 2013, and lots has changed at the Boar since 12 years ago when you held that position. We've welcomed new sections into the paper. We've got new initiatives like this podcast. But one of the biggest changes we've seen is the decline in the number of print editions. So back in 2013, the Boar was still publishing 12 editions a year, and we're now down to 6. So how did you manage to get 12 editions out in a year?
Not that I want to fact check you, but I think we did more than that.
Oh, really?
Because I think we did them every other week, and the terms there were 3 terms of 10.
Yeah.
So I think we did 15.
Oh, wow.
And we did a freshers edition, and we did a special elections edition. So yeah, I think it was more like 17 editions that we did. Not that I'm fact checking you, but yeah. So I think it was slightly more than that. I mean, when we started, we were being told how they used to do one every week just a few years previously, and we were like, how on earth did you do that? I think it was, I suppose, when they were doing it every week, the website wasn't as big a thing, so there wasn't as much a commitment to, kind of be a bit more getting stuff out as quickly. We were certainly doing a lot more of that. How did we do it? I don't know. I think we just used to really enjoy going in on a Saturday and just sitting there and pulling it together and, trying to get people involved and writing a lot of articles yourself because people let you down. And I just don't know. I don't really know how we did it. We just did it. It was good fun, and there was like deadlines to meet, and a lot of us are very good at just having that strict deadline and keeping on top of it. And it wasn't even, now I suspect you probably can do a lot of it remotely, but we were going in every Saturday to pull the paper together, so we could send it to print, or send it to the lawyer first and then send it to print. I don't really know. We just kind of got on with it.
That's so fair. I mean, to be fair, we still do a lot in the offices. Our freshers print is done all virtually. That one will be coming up. It'll probably be out by the time this podcast is out. But yeah, so we still do a lot in the offices, but I think with so much now on the digital side of the website, we have a lot going up on there as well. So that's one thing that we do a lot more now. But we've been trying to look back through the Boar archives, and this might be wrong as well, because if you say you did more than 12, which I sure you did, then this might be wrong as well. But we've been taking a look back at the old print editions, and it seems like you took over as editor around January 2013, so halfway through your final year at university. How were editors elected back then? So now we elect our editors in March every year, and they stay on for a year. Did you change editors halfway through the year, or was there a handover period of any sort?
So in our year, we changed the system to be like all societies where you have elections every year. So we were the first year to do that in that March, April time. But before that, it was a bit like I think we always used to say it was a bit like the Chinese Communist Party, where the current incumbents would vote on the next one. It was all a little bit, university society is supposed to be democratic, aren't they? It wasn't very democratic then. It was basically just you held the role until you didn't want to, and then there'd be a decision made amongst the exec team at that point of who would take over. So we decided that me and the previous editor, she'd kind of set the ball in motion to try and turn it into a bit more of a democratic society, and I kind of pushed that through a bit because it didn't feel as democratic as other university societies, so that's what we tried to do. So, but yeah, as I say, back then it was a bit like it wasn't the most democratic. It was just decided by the people already in charge of who was going to be in charge next.
Well, they clearly chose you, and you became editor. And then after you graduated work with a degree in history and politics, you went on to study a master's in broadcast journalism at City. Broadcast journalism is obviously different from what we do at the Boar. So why did you choose broadcast, and what drew you to that master's in specific?
I'd kind of read about the masters, that it was a very good, very well thought of. I applied for a number of universities across the country to see which ones I could get into. I think London really did kind of attract me. I think I was kind of thinking that I'd get more opportunities in London. I think that has changed a lot more in broadcasting now. But, in 2013, the media operation outside of London was kind of in its infancy, really. I think I chose broadcast because at that time, it certainly felt like newspapers were not doing very well. And I kind of enjoyed, I did Raw as well, and I really enjoyed doing that. And so wanted to kind of broaden my skill set and look in video, and then kind of really enjoyed doing kind of TV stuff. And I think what has now transpired, I would say, is that newspapers have managed to ride the storm of the internet in terms of they've just adapted to either a free model or they've adapted to a subscription model. And now a lot of them are doing very well, even if it's not in print anymore. Whereas I think TV is now going through that kind of transition. We are now facing the existential crisis. What do we do? How do we manage the internet in the way that the newspapers were doing back in 2013? But I think I kind of concluded that video was always going to be popular. And so even if it wasn't going to be, TV news that you sit down and watch at 6 o'clock, there's always going to be an appetite for video, and so I wanted to broaden my skill sets in that area.
And how did your time at City set you up for the career that you're in now?
It gave me really great insight into, the kind of careers you can have in TV journalism, things that you don't think about. I think there's a lot of people who sit at home and watch, TV programs in the news, and they just haven't got any sense of what people are doing behind the scenes to try and make that happen. And we had a brilliant media law course that gave you really great grounding in what you can and can't do. I think it was at that point that I sort of realised that I hadn't really made the most of my time at Warwick to get away with things. Once you start going into the professional world, you have to be a bit more strict and honest, and not honest, but a bit more kind of like, you don't have as much freedom. You have a lot more freedom to write what you want, to talk about what you want in student journalism. And I think that once I started at City and realised, there's actually a lot of rules here, I started to realise that perhaps I didn't make the most of Warwick as much as I should have done. But yeah, so it kind of set me up with giving me great insight into different parts of the industry, media law, and I think it was what then led me to getting work experience at ITN through speaking to someone who came and did a talk at ITN. So it also gave me contacts, which are often the most valuable thing you can have in this industry.
And I think that's a good time to segue then onto what you did after City. So after City, you went into your first job, which was a researcher for ITV's Tonight and On Assignment series. And then you later went back to work as a producer-director on the Tonight programme. What did you learn from this role so early in your career? And what did you take back with you later when you went back to that programme?
It was just a bit of a sense of, I was quite astounded about how much goes into making 30 minutes of television, or when it's an ITV 30, it's 24 minutes of television. It's often weeks, if not months, of work and research and filming and editing. And I was just so shocked at how much goes into it. And then it's over in a flash on the TV, and people, either watch it or they don't. I learned that diligence is really important, and being so precise. I think that's really important. I think it's something that I've always kind of kept with and talked to younger people about it, is it's just so important to make sure that you're right in your facts and that you can feel confident in what you're putting on air. It's very nerve-wracking. I still find it very nerve-wracking when something goes on air and I'm just waiting for the complaints to come in that something's wrong. But so I learned very early on about kind of making sure you're organized and diligent so that you can stand up and go, no, I'm right, when that complaint comes in. Because in a funny way, in TV, you can't unbroadcast something. You can, when you write an article online, you can issue a correction, you can do something, but if something's aired, it's aired. So it can be quite a nerve-wracking thing. So yeah, I learned a lot about how much prep goes into it, and also just being about learning how to be so diligent in the work you do, and it'll pay dividends and it'll make people keep on hiring you.
And you've worked on so many documentaries and news programmes in your career on such a wide range of topics. Just to name a few: Brexit, MI5, COVID, the January 6th riots, Captain Tom. I'm sure every documentary is different from one another, but what would you say an average, if there is an average, day in the life on shoot looks like?
What's an average day? Well, often you've got a camera. So that's normally a continuity that you have. Honestly, it really does change all the time. I mean, look, if you do what we call sit-down interviews, where you sit someone down and you just interview them, yes, there's a general formula of like, right, there's a chair, put the cameras this way, let's light it, let's put some sound in. Oh, hello, you're here to do the interview, are you? Let's do the interview, and then they're off. But when you do something, I made a series about the Port of Dover last year, where it's kind of observational documentary. You often just rock up and you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what's going to happen. In the middle of filming last year on one of the busiest summer getaways. They had the Crowdstrike computer outage which happened last year, where all the computers across the world just seemed to crash, and it happened whilst we were filming. And I was just like, okay, right, we've got to deal with that now. That's the story, and that's what makes it so exciting. Is you can just kind of, when things change, best laid plans are thrown up is actually when it's the most exciting. So there are certain things that do kind of are the same. You work with a team and you have cameras and you try and get what you can, and the day will start and it will end at some point, and you might eat in between. But genuinely, it does differ so much, and that is what's so fun about it.
So, yeah,
I was
Rachel,
just going to say,
go, Rachel.
speaking of things that kind of happen suddenly and you have to deal with, is there one standout moment that might be the most dramatic or have been the most stressful, something that happened and you had to kind of come up with a solution that stands out to you?
It's actually one which was really early on in my career that's just come to my head. We were making a Tonight program about noise pollution. Sounds really fascinating, doesn't it? And we'd found this. It was very complicated, but essentially we'd looked at government papers, and it basically meant that these poor people who were sitting next to an 8-lane motorway were being abandoned by local authorities. They weren't being given any help to deal with the noise that they were having to put up with, and that we found was actually damaging their health, because even though you think you're sleeping through it, when a big lorry goes past your house, your heart starts racing, and that can, over many years, but over time it can really damage your physical health as well. And so we found these people who were dealing with this, and we get there and they go, we don't want to be filmed. And it's like, we'd spent so much money getting the presenter there, getting the cameras there, getting us all there, and they were just like, I don't want to be filmed. And I was like, this is an absolute nightmare. And I just turned to my boss who was filming with me. I was like, just give me 10 minutes. And I just went and knocked on doors. I just went round and just knocked on all the neighbours' doors and said, hi, we're from ITV. Do you fancy being on the telly to talk about the motorway? And I found this lovely couple who were just up for it. And we filmed it, and they were the best thing in the programme. And sometimes the best thing in the programme is the thing that you find like that. It's about being just tenacious. Like, I don't want to sound arrogant, but it is about just going, right, okay, there's no point crying about that. That's not working. Let's find something else. And that's part of the fun. And it was so rewarding when that happened as well.
And that leads quite nicely into the next section, because obviously you've got to think in your feet in your role, and you've also got to turn these documentaries around very, very quickly. So recently you worked on the Channel 4 documentary, Can Elon Musk Rule the World? How do you deal with turning these documentaries around so quickly? What's the process behind all of this?
I think so often with programs like that, where Elon Musk was obviously less so now, but at that point was so in the news. Things were happening all the time. And you can very easily constantly chase your tail and go, oh, well, that's the story now. Let's completely change the documentary. And then 5 days later, you're like, oh, no, actually, no, that's no longer the story. It's something else. You just got to keep a cool head. You've kind of got to go, right, we've got a commission now to make this program, Can Elon Musk Rule the World? We've got 10 days to make it. What is going to be the thing that people want to hear in 10 days' time? And you have to react to news events, but you just can't be ruled by them. It's about keeping a cool head and keeping yourself abreast of what's going on, but also having a clear narrative of, no, what are we trying to say here? We're not trying to just tell people what's happened today. That's what the news does. We're trying to give some context. We're trying to be broader. We're trying to tell you something different, the context of what's going on. Keeping a cool head, working very long hours, that also helps. Often doing interviews, and then going into the edit and some very, very late nights. But if you love it, then it doesn't bother you. And just, you have to have a really good team. None of these things are ever put together by one person. They're put together by a massive team of people who really care about it and have got really great ideas, and you just have to work together, and you just have to make sure you're communicating with each other. We'll often split these programs where you have one edit doing part 1, another edit part 2, another edit part 3, another edit part 4, because otherwise you'd never get it done. But they all have to be talking to each other, otherwise you'll start repeating stuff, and it needs to have this coherent narrative throughout. So I think it's about keeping a cool head, working hard, but also just thinking, trying to stay above the news agenda, trying to go, no, but hang on, this isn't a news program. This is a more context-based program. How are we gonna be different?
And so to move on a bit, you have obviously talked about the documentaries you've worked on a little bit, but you've also worked on some live broadcasts. And obviously last year was a big year for elections globally, and you worked on Channel 4's coverage for both the UK election in July and the US presidential election in November. That UK election came just 6 weeks after Rishi Sunak announced it in the pouring rain in Downing Street. What were those 6 weeks like leading up to the election, preparing for the election night coverage?
So we were kind of gearing up for what everyone thought there'd be was an autumn election. And I'm not exaggerating to say there were 3 of us working on it on the day that the election was called. And I was actually doing a recce, so like just going to check something else. I was at Suella Braverman's count, whatever that one was. I can't remember now. But I was basically just in a sports centre in like Hazelmere or wherever it is, and was kind of seeing all the news going, it's going to happen. And I was like, right, well, we've got not very long, because we were planning this is going to be in the autumn. And I got back to the office after going there, and the 3 of us just looked at each other going, all right then, 6 weeks. I mean, the first thing you have to do is get a team together. So it was about, getting people in who could help. And then you have to, unlike ITV and the BBC, it is true to say that they'll have had a bigger team, and and Sky will have had a lot more prep than we did. We were starting from scratch. We didn't have a studio. We didn't have a set. I think we may have had presenters in theory. We didn't have camera operators and live views to broadcast live. We didn't have graphics. We had so little, and it's just it's about making that list. What do we need, and when do we need it by? Starting with, right, you go and, well, our brilliant production manager on it was like sourcing the studio and getting staffing. And I started working on things like graphics and guests, and then my boss was obviously doing contract deals with Channel 4, things that you don't even think about that go on. That it is a business, and you've got to make a contract with Channel 4 and agree how much money they're going to give us, and how much we can do with that money. So there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, and somehow we did it. We were very, very proud of that program at the end of it, because I think that we made much more noise than the other broadcasters. We certainly won the critics' choice, and we doubled the ratings that the last Channel 4 election program got in 2019, which was it was kind of like an alternative election night. It had comedy in, and Channel 4 decided, I think quite rightly, that it didn't really work, and that they wanted just something that was much more analytical, and we could pride ourselves of being the home of the best analysis. And so teaming up with the news agents and having Emily Maitlis on board alongside Krishnan Guru Murthy meant that I think we managed to do it. But yeah, that was a lot of long hours and a lot of weekends. And I think on the day of the election, I think I worked 26 hours straight. But you just get through on adrenaline and orange Lucozade.
And speaking of the day of the actual election, what did the election night look like from the exit poll at 10 p.m. all the way through to going off air in the morning? What responsibilities did you have? What was happening?
So we've had this thing called the hub, which was where all the information was coming in. So all of our lives, all of our correspondence, all of the information from AP, where we were getting all the data from, that was all coming into the thing that I was running. And it was, I had WhatsApp groups with all of these producers on the ground in counts who'd be like, right, speaking of Suella Braverman count in 5 minutes. Or Suella Braverman's just arrived, pictures on outside source 23. And I was then feeding that back into my boss in the gallery, who would then decide whether that makes it on air. So I was kind of what we call input, I suppose. So you kind of like you kind of gather what's coming in, and he decides what goes out on air. And it was such good fun, and the adrenaline, and we'd already scenarioed kind of, because we had rough timings of when counts were going to declare, and I'd be like, okay, but I might be shouting to you, Jeremy Hunt's, the Chancellor's counts is declaring in 5 minutes, but Rishi Sunak's is declaring in 5 minutes as well. Which one do you take? And he's like, well, I obviously take the Prime Minister, but there's obviously other ones where you're like, oh, do I take James Cleverly or do I take Priti Patel? And we had these really big arguments about, well, James Cleverly's majority is shorter, so maybe he's more likely to lose his seat, so you should take that. And we were trying to get insight on the ground from the from the producers we had of which ones to take. A perfect example was around 6 o'clock in the morning, Jess Phillips was on stage and was really emotional and she was getting a lot of heckling from the crowds. And she was very close to losing her seat as well. And so I had this brilliant producer on the ground who was like, you should take this. I know she's won, but you should take it. It's really tense down here. And so I said that to my boss, who then took it on air, and we were the only ones taking it. And, Jess Phillips was really emotional in an interview she did with us. And that's when you're like really proud, because you're thinking we've done something really great here and we've beat the opposition. And so yeah, that was basically my role, and I don't think I got up to go to the toilet all night. And yeah, it was really good fun. And the other abiding memory I have is about 6:30 in the morning, where my boss was like, I said Liz Truss count on OS 24 is about to declare, and in the count centres, they often declare multiple seats in the same centre. So he was like, no, I'm going to get it right way around now. He was like, no, that's Northwest Norfolk. Liz Truss isn't there. And I was like, no, it is. It's Liz Truss's count. She's just not there. I don't know where she is. She's not on stage, but it is definitely her count. And we took it, and, it was one of the most remarkable moments of the night. And yeah, we were on air till 9 a.m. And then at the end of it, we just were like, I think let's go to the pub.
I honestly don't envy you at all. I was doing a little bit of coverage as well on the general election night for the Boar, and I remember putting an article up at 2:30, eating a sausage sandwich at 3 o'clock, and then calling it a night. Zara Sultana's seat had been called in Coventry South, and then I called it a night. So yeah, I don't envy you at all. But just one thing now, moving on from elections, well, not moving on from elections, but moving on from the UK elections. You also worked on the US election, and that has a fixed date every 4 years. So you know what date you're preparing for, and you can plan a bit more than the UK election. So how else did that differ from covering the UK election as well?
Well, in some ways, I don't think I'm breaking any commercial confidences here, but Channel 4 didn't really decide whether they wanted to do the US election until pretty late on. So until you know whether you're making it, you can't really do any work on it. So we still only really had about 7 or 8 weeks to make that one. And that came with its different challenges. So the way the US elections work, you're not sitting there waiting for counts to come at 3:43 in the morning. You have, at the top of the hour, you have states that are declaring which way it's gone, whether it's gone for Trump or Harris. So it's a much more regimented program. You can kind of pretty much map out what's going to happen in a way you can't with the UK election. You just have to go with it. You can map out your first 45 minutes, and then you just have to see what happens. Whereas a US election, you can be a bit more regimented. but we had a lot more technical challenges. So people probably don't even realize when you watch it on air, but the gallery which controls the program was in London, and the gallery was controlling the studio in Washington. Jeremy Vine, who was doing the graphics, and I was producing him, that was in London. So there was a lot more technical challenges. So it was, it kind of gave different challenges, but also was really, really good fun. And we did go off there at 6 a.m, so at least we got a little bit more sleep.
And now, if we rewind back a few years, you were producer director for the ITV interview with Prince Harry back in 2023. That was one of his first sit-down solo interviews after taking a step back from the royal family. There must have been a big team behind that interview. And what goes on behind the scenes to organise major interviews like that one? And what is it like to know that you're involved in such a big piece of TV?
So I came onto it relatively late, like kind of negotiations between ITN, Tom Bradby and Prince Harry were going on, and Penguin were the publishers. That they'd been going on for quite a while. And I came onto it probably about 3 weeks before the interview was going to happen. And then the first thing we had to do was read the book. And so we went to Penguin Random House in Vauxhall, and we sat there for 8 hours and had to read the entire book in 8 hours. I think we were allowed a notebook, but it was all on laptops, and the laptops were watermarked with our names, so there weren't any leaks. And for anyone who doesn't know what was in the book, there was a lot of revelations in there. There was a lot of brotherly angst. There was accusations of, essentially assault by the future king. There was talks of rows between Harry and his father, who's now the king. It was a jaw-dropping book when we read it. And then we just came out of there and we went for dinner. It was just the four of us. It was me, Tom Bradby, and my boss, and another colleague. And we just sat and have dinner, and we were just like, we're the only people who know what's in this book, and it's going to be just huge. Flew to LA, and then did an interview with Harry. We'd done a lot of prep for questions and discussing what we wanted to say, and we kind of knew that we'd have extracts of the book that we could use in terms of his audio book, so we didn't want him to just repeat what he was going to say there. You've always got to think, what are we going to tell that's different? What we've got the TV, what's going to be, I can't remember whether it was serialized, the book, but there was a real good chance that the book could leak, and actually it did leak in the end. For some bizarre reason, it was put on the shelves in Spain earlier than it was supposed to be, and so it just went on all the bookshelves, and people were like, "That's not supposed to be out yet." And then it was just this mad scramble of like, "Can anyone Google translate this Spanish version of the Prince Harry book?" But we had to make sure that we had good news lines that we could run for a TV program that weren't necessarily always in the book, even though they were informed by the book. So lots of question prep. We went and did the interview. Then there's obviously the technical stuff where you've got to get the interview back to London. So I did a big kind of send it over the internet now, which is brilliant. And then we edited it over Christmas. And we were just like, this is just going to be so big. And it was just all over the front pages. It was sold to dozens of countries across the world. It was the biggest thing I think I've worked on, and was so, again, really rewarding to see your work kind of going so big, and knowing that I was in the room when it happened. I do remember walking into the room that we were offered, and I was like, oh, this is going to look awful. This is not big enough. And they were like, that's the room, deal with it. And we just had to kind of make the most of what we had. And I remember a colleague saying, "Oh, that room was awful, Chris. Why did you pick that?" I was like, "It was either that or the hot tub. The only two options were them sitting in the hot tub or sitting in that room." And we were told that was all we got. So we made it work, and it was a really fascinating thing to do.
It sounds incredible, and having the opportunity to read the book first is so so amazing. You touched upon it earlier, but we're obviously seeing a shift in viewing habits, especially among younger people, away from broadcast TV to short form content like YouTube and TikTok with the 15-second, 30-second videos. As someone who works on TV news documentaries, are you finding this rise of short form content something difficult to deal with? And how do you ensure you're engaging the widest audience possible?
It's really interesting. I think what a lot of TV are trying to do is create long form content that can also be short form content. For example, the Channel 4 election we did last year for the UK, the program was 11 hours long. People weren't going to watch it for 11 hours, but we got a lot of social media pickup. There were moments where Alistair Campbell and Nadine Dorries were having a row, and that caused a great short form content moment. So I think what we are all trying to do is thinking, when we're making our programs, how else can we be making stuff that does make to short form? I think the two can live in tandem. I think that there are times where people want to kind of scroll and watch very short stuff, and they want to watch creators. But then I think there are times where people want to watch something that's been a bit more. There's a lot more time taken to craft something. And I do think that in an age where you can't necessarily trust what you read, what you see on the internet, that people will still turn to the trusted news brands to get the facts that they think that they need, that they know that they can trust what they see on Channel 4, on ITV, on the BBC is going to have been checked, is going to have been, verified, and is impartial in a way that stuff isn't on the internet. I think that there will always be a market for that. Will we be shifting more to doing much more on YouTube and stuff? I'm sure we will. There are deals being done by the broadcasters to put their content on YouTube as a platform. But that's what's interesting. Is it YouTube is a platform, isn't it? It's not. YouTube doesn't make content itself. We make content, as do many people make content on their own to YouTube. It's all about making sure that you've got stuff that's engaging for people. And I think ITN do a brilliant job of doing that. And ITN, which is celebrating its 70th year this year, has always been in the forefront of innovating, and always will.
And I definitely agree that I can watch a lot of short form content, but I still do turn to TV news as a trusted form of journalism as well. And I think long may it continue. But quickly, before we move on to our quickfire questions, which is how we wrap up each episode, we're going to ask you one more little question. And you may have touched upon it already, but what is your favorite thing you've worked on in your career so far?
Favorite thing that I've worked on? I mean, Harry was pretty up there, and so was the UK election. I made a documentary about e-scooters a few years ago, which I really did love doing, mainly because I put a load of commercial music on it, so I had a lot of Harry Styles played. What else have I really enjoyed? Another thing which I found was really rewarding was when we were going into the first COVID lockdown, and I made a program which was, I think it was called Coronavirus: How to Protect the Elderly, and there was just so much in those first few days of it was just, I think it was just before lockdown, but in those 2 weeks running up to lockdown, things changed so quickly. I remember us having a meeting. We made this program in about 10 days, and on the first day, we were like, "Oh, do you think this story's big enough? Is it just going to go away?" And then by the end of it, it was like all hell had broken loose. It was such a bizarre program to make because things just changed so rapidly. But it was so rewarding because the ratings were through the roof, because people were genuinely scared, and people didn't know what was going to happen. And I think what we did as a trusted brand, which was the Tonight programme, again, you've seen all the news, you've seen all the press conferences, just watch this for 24 minutes, and we're going to tell you what's going on. We're going to tell you what the latest advice is, and we're going to tell it with human voices. We're going to speak to people who are going through it. And I did really, I found that as much as it wasn't necessarily the most enjoyable program, it was certainly one of the most rewarding programs I've made, because it just made you feel like, oh, this is what public service TV is about. That sounds really lofty, doesn't it? But I think it is true.
And now we've covered quite a broad range of topics, from the Boar all the way through to your more recent work. As Tom mentioned, we've got a few quick fire questions, so I'll start them off. Firstly, you can be neither of these, so be honest, but tea or coffee?
Oh, tea.
Yeah.
Morning person or night owl?
Night owl.
Who is your dream interview guest?
Dead or alive?
Either. Or both. You can
do one.
I think sitting down with Queen Elizabeth II would have been brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
What's one thing that you always carry with you on a shoot?
I don't always carry with me on a shoot. Other than you want something more interesting than just my phone. I always carry with me on a shoot. A lens wipe. That sounds really ridiculous, but I can't stand it when my glasses are dirty. So I always have like lens wipes in pockets everywhere. Yeah, that's what I always carry with me on a shoot.
What's your favourite thing to do to unwind after a long day at work?
What's my favourite thing to do? I actually quite listening to the radio. I just like having the kind of radio on in the background whilst I'm making dinner, or kind of music radio, or watch a drama. Something that's not too heavy if it's been a heavy week. Been rewatching The West Wing this week.
That's the end of our quickfire section. So to finish off the episode, we're going to ask you a question that we ask all of our guests, which is, what's one piece of advice that you'd give to someone who's at the Boar now?
Just enjoy it. And people said this to me when I was there, and I just was like, they're just old, and they're just talking nonsense. But genuinely, it'll be the most fun that you have. I mean, look, I have a lot of fun now, but I also have a lot of bureaucracy, and I have a lot of legals and office politics and stuff like that. I think, honestly, just enjoy doing student media, because it is so much fun, and you can write what you want. You can write about what you want, and you can make what you want, and you can just be really proud of it in the future. And don't. Yeah, just enjoy it.
I think that's such great advice, because the Boar gives you such a good opportunity to find out exactly what you like within journalism and the media.
Also, don't play it down. I think some people play it down as like, oh, it's only student media. But if I see on a CV that someone's done things like their student paper or their student radio station, it shows a passion. And I think that will then show up in someone's work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, getting involved in student media is such a brilliant opportunity for everyone. So thank you so much for joining us today, Chris. We have really enjoyed having you here today to chat about everything that you've done since leaving Warwick. It's been so interesting, and a real different side to discuss broadcast journalism rather than just newspaper journalism and written journalism. So thank you so much for coming on today.
No problem at all. Really great to meet you all.
We hope that you enjoyed listening to our interview with Chris. It was fascinating to gain insight into broadcast journalism, a side of journalism we haven't touched upon much on the podcast yet, and to see how, even by starting at a student newspaper like The Boar, you can still end up working behind the scenes in TV if that's something that you're interested in.
If you're a new listener to the podcast, then we do hope you'll stick around for some more of our episodes. Every fortnight, we bring you a conversation with a Boar alum like Chris, and we've certainly got some very insightful and interesting chats still to bring you.
And of course, you can also listen back to all our episodes so far if you'd like to catch up. We've had some fantastic guests, including the former national news editor at The Observer, a sub-editor at Tatler, and a reporter at Politico. So you've got plenty to catch up on. Also, a lot of our guests so far were on the exec of the Boar, so make sure you do check out deputy editor applications. You've still got time. And I mean, me and Lucy and Tom were all deps at a point, so it's definitely worth getting involved in.
Definitely. And in the meantime, you can stay up to date on everything Boar related at www.theboar.org and on Instagram at Warwick Boar, and check out the latest updates about the podcast at Hogging the Mic on Instagram.
Another episode will be landing in your podcast feeds as usual in 2 weeks' time, so that's the 23rd of October. But for now, grab another overpriced co-op meal deal, start preparing your week 3 circling outfit, and we'll speak to you soon.